I'm Bessie Thompson, 72, a retired nurse from Maine. For 25 years, my daughter Sophia didn't speak to me. Not a call, not a letter, nothing. We were estranged until last year when something unexpected happened. I inherited a fortune that changed everything. Suddenly, I received a Thanksgiving invitation from the daughter who had forgotten I existed. But that dinner didn't go quite like she planned. Before I share what happened at that fateful dinner, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Take a second to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what I told my daughter that left her speechless. I grew up in a small coastal town in Maine, the kind where everyone knows your name and your business. My parents worked hard their whole lives but never had much. Dad was a fisherman who smelled perpetually of the sea, and Mom cleaned houses for the wealthy summer people. They taught me the value of hard work and helping others, which led me naturally to nursing. I started my nursing career in 1972 at County General Hospital. Those were different times for nurses. We wore those starched white caps and uniforms, and doctors treated us like glorified assistants rather than medical professionals. But I loved the work despite the challenges. There's something deeply satisfying about easing suffering and being there for people on their worst days. It was at the hospital that I met Frank Thompson. He wasn't a patient, but a delivery guy who brought medical supplies twice a week. Frank had this infectious laugh and an ability to light up a room. He'd always have some silly joke ready when he came through the door. After months of flirting, he finally asked me out, and we were married within a year. Frank worked at the Thompson manufacturing plant, no relation despite sharing the name. It was steady work with decent pay enough that we could buy a small two-bedroom house on the edge of town. We were so proud of that little house with its peeling blue paint and creaky porch. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Sophia came along in 1975, our only child. The moment they placed her in my arms, this tiny thing, with a shock of dark hair and bright blue eyes, I knew I'd do anything for her. Frank cried when he held her, his big calloused hands making her look even smaller. We named her Sophia after my grandmother, hoping she'd inherit some of that old woman's spirit and determination. The early years with Sophia were beautiful. She was an intelligent, curious child who talked early and asked endless questions. By 3, she could already identify all her letters and count to 20. I still remember her sitting on our worn living room carpet with picture books spread around her, completely absorbed in her own little world of stories. Frank adored her, bringing home little treasures from the factory's scrap bin that he'd turn into toys. He'd spend hours building dollhouses from discarded wood pieces or fashioning tiny furniture from metal scraps. Sophia would squeal with delight each time he presented her with something new. But things started to change when Sophia was around 10. Frank had always enjoyed his beer on weekends, but gradually, 1 beer turned to 6, and weekends extended to weekdays. The factory was cutting back hours, and the stress wore on him. He'd come home irritable and retreat to the garage with his six-pack. Some nights he wouldn't come in until long after Sophia was asleep. I tried talking to him, suggesting he get help, but he'd brush me off, saying he wasn't like his father, who was a real alcoholic. Frank never got physically abusive, but his emotional absence left a hole in our family. Sophia would ask where Daddy was, and I'd make excuses about him being tired from work or having projects to finish. Our financial situation grew more precarious as Frank's hours at the factory continued to decrease. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital to compensate, sometimes working 16 hours straight. I'd come home exhausted, bones aching, barely able to keep my eyes open long enough to help Sophia with homework or hear about her day. Sophia began to withdraw as she entered her teenage years. The bright, chatty girl became quiet and reserved. She'd lock herself in her room for hours, emerging only for meals or school. I told myself it was normal teenage behavior, but deep down I knew our family was fracturing. Despite the challenges at home, Sophia excelled academically. She was consistently at the top of her class, involved in debate club and editor of the school newspaper. Her teachers raved about her potential. When she was 16, her English teacher pulled me aside after a parent-teacher conference. "Mrs. Thompson, your daughter has a remarkable mind," she said. "She should be thinking about competitive colleges. With her grades and writing ability, she could go anywhere." I swelled with pride, but worried about the cost. College seemed like an impossible dream with our finances, but I was determined to find a way. I started picking up even more shifts, sometimes working 7 days a week. I opened a special savings account and put away every extra penny. Frank's drinking had worsened, and he was contributing less and less to our household income, but I was resolute that Sophia would have opportunities I never had. During her senior year, the acceptance letters started arriving. Sophia had applied to 7 schools and got into all of them, including 2 Ivy League universities. The day the Stanford acceptance came with a partial scholarship offer, she actually hugged me for the first time in years, her eyes bright with excitement. "Mom, I did it," she whispered. And for that moment, all the exhaustion and worry seemed worth it. But as we reviewed the financial aid packages, reality set in. Even with scholarships, we were looking at tens of thousands of dollars in costs. I sat at our kitchen table late one night, calculator in hand, trying to make impossible numbers work. The savings I'd accumulated over years would barely cover the first semester. In the spring of 2000, just as Sophia was preparing for graduation, my elderly Aunt Margaret fell seriously ill. Aunt Margaret had never married and lived alone in the family homestead, a colonial-era house on 10 acres of land about an hour north of us. The property had been in our family for generations, but had fallen into disrepair as Aunt Margaret aged. She called me to her bedside at the county nursing facility where she'd been admitted. Her thin hand gripped mine with surprising strength as she made her proposal. "Bessie, I don't have much time left." She wheezed, oxygen tubes trailing from her nostrils. "The doctors give me 6 months, maybe a year. The house and land will go to you when I pass, but I need someone to care for me until then. Come stay with me. Bring Frank and Sophia if you want, but I need you." I stared at her, understanding what she was really saying. If I cared for her in her final months, I would inherit the family property. It was worth something, though, how much I wasn't sure given its condition. But accepting would mean cutting back my hours at the hospital dramatically, possibly even quitting. It would mean less money for Sophia's education right when she needed it most. "I need to think about it, Aunt Margaret," I said gently. "Sophia's about to start college." She nodded weakly. "Don't wait too long, dear. I've spoken to my lawyer. If you can't do it, the property goes to your cousin Russell's family." I drove home in turmoil. The responsible thing would be to accept Aunt Margaret's offer. The property might eventually be worth more than what I could save for Sophia's education. But Sophia needed the money now, not years in the future, after property was sold. That night, I sat Sophia down to discuss options. She was 18 now, legally an adult, and I felt she deserved to be part of the decision. I explained about Aunt Margaret's offer and our financial situation as clearly as I could. "Stanford is offering a good scholarship, but we're still short about $15,000 per year," I explained. "I have $8,000 saved. We could take out loans for the rest, but you'd graduate with significant debt." "What about Dad? Can't he contribute anything?" Sophia asked, her voice tight with frustration. I sighed. "Your father's hours have been cut again, and most of what he makes goes to the mortgage and his personal expenses." We both knew what that meant. "So you're saying I can't go," she said flatly. "No, that's not what I'm saying. We have options. You got into the state university with a full scholarship. Or we could start you at community college for 2 years, then transfer. Or we take the loans and hope your degree leads to a job that makes them worthwhile." Sophia's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Everyone else is going to their dream schools. Emma's going to NYU. Taylor got into UCLA. And you want me to go to community college after I worked so hard?" "I'm just laying out options, honey. We have to be practical." "Practical," she repeated the word dripping with disdain. "If you'd been practical, you would have left Dad years ago when he started drinking away his paycheck. If you'd been practical, you would have gotten a better job than nursing. If you'd been practical, we wouldn't be in this position." Her words stung like a physical slap. I'd spent years working double shifts to keep our family afloat, while Frank spiraled years putting money aside for her future years, supporting her activities and dreams. And now she was blaming me for our circumstances. "That's not fair, Sophia," I said quietly. "Life isn't fair," she shot back. "Isn't that what you always say?" She stormed out and I heard her bedroom door slam. I sat alone at the kitchen table until Frank stumbled in around midnight, reeking of beer. He mumbled something unintelligible before collapsing on the couch, where he'd taken to sleeping. The next day, I made my decision. I called Aunt Margaret and declined her offer as gently as I could. Then I went to the bank and withdrew my entire savings, everything I'd set aside over years of extra shifts and careful budgeting. I even sold my mother's pearl necklace, the only valuable thing I owned, to a jeweler in Portland. I left the check on Sophia's bed with a note, "For your first semester at Stanford. We'll figure out the rest. I believe in you. Love, Mom." She never thanked me. In fact, she barely spoke to me in the weeks leading up to her departure for college. On move-in day, I drove her to the airport alone, Frank being too hungover to come. She allowed me a brief, stiff hug before disappearing through security, rolling suitcase in tow, not once looking back. I cried the entire drive home, wondering if I'd made the right choice. Maybe I should have taken Aunt Margaret's offer. Maybe I should have been firmer about Sophia choosing a more affordable school. Maybe I should have left Frank years ago when his drinking first became a problem. So many maybes and no way to know which path would have led to a better outcome. The first semester of Sophia's college experience seemed to go well from the little I could gather from her infrequent calls. She'd joined the student newspaper and was considering a major in journalism or communications. When she came home for Christmas break, however, I noticed a change. She had new clothes, expensive brands I couldn't afford, and she spoke of weekend trips to San Francisco and parties at professors' homes. "How are you affording all this?" I asked one evening as she texted rapidly on a new phone I hadn't purchased. She barely glanced up. "I made friends. They show me around." "Sophia, the money I gave you was for tuition and basic living expenses. If you're spending it on clothes and trips—" "Relax, Mom," she interrupted. "I took out some student loans to cover the rest of tuition. The clothes were gifts from friends who know I can't afford nice things." The way she emphasized "can't afford" made it clear she resented our financial situation. I swallowed my hurt. "I'm just concerned about you taking on debt." "Everyone takes out loans," she replied dismissively. "Besides, once I graduate and get a good job, they'll be easy to pay off." The rest of her visit was tense. She spent most of her time in her room or out with high school friends she'd previously claimed to have outgrown. Frank made matters worse by showing up drunk to our Christmas dinner, knocking over the small tree I'd decorated in a sad attempt at normalcy. By the time Sophia returned to school, I felt a growing distance between us that went beyond physical miles. She'd always been private, but now she seemed deliberately secretive, as though ashamed of her home and family. The true crisis came in March when Frank collapsed at work and was rushed to the hospital. The diagnosis was severe liver damage from years of alcohol abuse. He needed specialized treatment that our insurance only partially covered, leaving us with thousands in medical bills. I called Sophia to explain the situation, hoping for support or at least understanding. "I can't talk long, Mom. I have a midterm tomorrow," she said when she answered. "Your father's in the hospital, Sophia. His liver is failing from the drinking." I tried to keep my voice steady despite my exhaustion. There was a long pause. "Is he going to die?" She finally asked, her voice small and suddenly young. "Not immediately, but he needs treatment we can't really afford. I'm going to have to pick up even more shifts, and I'm worried I won't be able to help much with your summer tuition." Another pause, longer this time. "So, what are you saying?" I took a deep breath. "I think you should consider transferring to state for the remainder of your degree. You have a full scholarship offer there, and you could live at home to save on expenses." "Transfer?" Her voice rose in disbelief. "Are you serious? I just got settled here. I'm on the dean's list. I have connections for internships next year." "I know it's not ideal, but—" "Not ideal," she interrupted. "It would ruin everything I've worked for, all because Dad couldn't control his drinking and you couldn't control Dad." Her words hit like a physical blow. "That's not fair, Sophia." "You know what's not fair, having to leave a top university because my parents can't get their act together. Everyone else has families who actually planned for college. Normal families, functional families. We did the best we could with what we had," I said quietly. "Well, your best wasn't good enough," she snapped. "I'm not leaving Stanford. I'll figure it out myself since I can't count on either of you." She hung up and I sat in the hospital corridor, phone in hand, tears streaming down my face. A nurse I'd worked with for years stopped to ask if I was okay, but I couldn't even speak. How had we gotten here? How had my bright, loving little girl turned into this angry young woman who seemed to hate everything about her upbringing, everything about me? Frank was discharged a week later with strict instructions to stop drinking immediately and a regimen of expensive medications. To his credit, the health scare seemed to finally get through to him. He joined Alcoholics Anonymous and remained sober, though the damage to his liver was permanent. I took on a third job doing private home health care on weekends to manage the medical bills. Between work caring for Frank and worrying about Sophia, I was running on empty. I wrote to Sophia explaining the situation more calmly, but my letter went unanswered. I called several times, leaving voicemails that were never returned. Graduation day came in spring 2004. I received a formal invitation in the mail, the first communication from Sophia in months. Frank was too ill to travel, so I went alone, spending money we didn't have on airfare and a cheap motel 30 minutes from campus because I couldn't afford anything closer. The ceremony was held on a beautiful sunny day on Stanford's impressive campus. I spotted Sophia in her cap and gown surrounded by friends and their well-dressed families. When she saw me in my dated dress, she gave a tight smile and a quick introduction to her friends before excusing herself. "I have to meet my advisor," she said. "I'll see you at dinner." Dinner was at an expensive restaurant I couldn't really afford with Sophia and two friends whose parents couldn't attend. She spoke enthusiastically about her new job at a media company in Seattle starting in 3 weeks. "Seattle?" I asked, surprised. "That's so far from home." "That's kind of the point," she said with a laugh that her friends echoed. "Time to see something beyond little old Maine." I swallowed my hurt. "I'm proud of you, Sophia, despite everything you've done so well." She nodded distractedly, already turning back to her friends. I realized with a sinking heart that I was an afterthought at her graduation, an obligation to be fulfilled rather than someone to celebrate with. I paid for dinner with my credit card, knowing it would take months to pay off. The next morning, I tried to see Sophia before my flight, but she claimed to be busy with move-out. Our goodbye was brief and impersonal, a quick hug in her half-packed dorm room. "I'll call when I get settled in Seattle," she promised, but her eyes didn't meet mine. I never got that call. Weeks passed, then months. I called repeatedly but got voicemail. I sent letters to her new address found through her company's website but received no response. Eventually, one letter came back marked, "Return to sender." Our last real conversation happened at Christmas that year when she finally answered my call. "Sophia, thank God, I've been so worried." "I'm fine, Mom, just busy with the new job." Her voice was distant professional. "Will you be coming home for Christmas? Your dad's doing better. He's been sober for months now." "I can't. I have to work through the holidays. New hires don't get much time off." I swallowed my disappointment. "We could come visit you. I have some vacation days saved." "Don't," she cut me off. "Look, Mom, I need space right now. This job is demanding and I'm trying to establish myself." "I understand, but we're family. We should—" "Family?" She interrupted, her voice suddenly hard. "Let's talk about family. Let's talk about how I had to take out $60,000 in student loans because you couldn't afford to help me. Let's talk about how every other graduate is starting their career debt-free while I'm working overtime just to make minimum payments." "Sophia, we did everything we could." "It wasn't enough," she snapped. "Do you know what it was like growing up with an alcoholic father and a mother who was never home? Do you know what it's like trying to explain to people why my parents couldn't help with college? Do you know how embarrassing it was to always be the poor scholarship kid among classmates who had trust funds? I felt like I couldn't breathe. We sacrificed everything for you." "Well, I wish you hadn't. I wish you'd just been normal parents with normal moms and normal savings accounts. I wish I didn't have to spend the next 15 years of my life paying off debt because you forced me into this position." "That's not fair," I whispered. "I don't want to hear about fair. I'm done talking about this. I need to focus on my future without being dragged down by the past. Please don't call for a while. I need space." That was the last time I heard her voice for many years. The years after that final conversation with Sophia stretched into a desert of silence. I sent birthday cards, Christmas cards, even random postcards just to let her know I was thinking of her. Some came back marked "Return to sender," others simply disappeared into the void. I never knew if she read them or tossed them unopened into the trash. Frank's health continued to decline despite his sobriety. Years of alcohol abuse had taken their toll and his liver function worsened gradually. In 2005, he developed hepatic encephalopathy, a condition where toxins the liver can't filter reach the brain. He became confused, forgetful, sometimes not recognizing me or our home. I took a leave of absence from the hospital to care for him in his final months. We'd had a complicated marriage full of disappointments and broken promises, but there had been love too, especially in the early years. I couldn't abandon him at the end. He passed away on a rainy October morning while I was changing his bedsheets. One moment he was breathing, and the next he wasn't, just gone without a word or gesture of farewell. I sat beside him for hours, holding his hand as it grew cold, thinking about the bright young man with the infectious laugh who'd once brought joy into my life. I called Sophia immediately and left a voicemail about her father's passing. When she didn't respond, I sent a formal funeral announcement to her last known address. The funeral was small, mostly hospital colleagues and a few of Frank's remaining friends from the factory. Sophia didn't come. Later, I found out through a mutual acquaintance that Sophia had married a man named James Williams, a successful attorney she'd met in Seattle. I wasn't invited to the wedding. Through occasional social media updates that friends would mention, I learned she'd moved to Connecticut where her husband joined a prestigious law firm. I sent a congratulatory card to the address I found online. No response. The worst blow came when I discovered 3 years after the fact that Sophia had given birth to a daughter. I had a granddaughter I'd never met, never held. I learned this accidentally through an old neighbor whose niece followed Sophia on social media. Her name was Lucy. I sent a small package with a handmade quilt and a card expressing my joy at becoming a grandmother. The package was returned unopened. After Frank's death, the emptiness of our small house became unbearable. Every corner held memories both good and painful. I threw myself back into full-time nursing, picking up extra shifts, to exhaust myself so thoroughly that I'd fall asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. It was the only way to avoid lying awake thinking about my fractured family. Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket. I lost interest in things I once enjoyed. I lost weight without trying. Some days getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. A concerned coworker finally convinced me to see someone, and I was diagnosed with clinical depression. The medication helped, but the underlying grief remained. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. New friendships formed with coworkers who invited me to dinners and movie nights. I joined a book club at the local library, forcing myself to go even on days when I wanted nothing more than to stay home alone. Each small social connection was a thread pulling me back to the land of the living. The most unexpected connection came in the form of a scraggly, one-eyed dog named Bailey. He showed up at the hospital's staff entrance one rainy night, soaking wet and clearly abandoned. Despite signs warning against feeding strays, we emergency staff smuggled him bits of our lunches for weeks. When animal control finally came, I impulsively claimed him as mine. Bailey became my reason to get up in the morning. He needed walks, needed feeding, needed love. His uncomplicated affection was a balm to my wounded heart. He didn't care about my history or failures, just that I was there providing warmth and safety. In return, he offered loyalty that helped fill the Sophia-shaped hole in my life. 2 years after Frank's death, my elderly neighbor Elaine fell and broke her hip. She had no family nearby, so I helped coordinate her care during recovery. When she confessed her fear of returning to an empty house, I offered my spare bedroom, the one that had been Sophia's. What was meant to be temporary became permanent. Elaine, a retired librarian with a wickedly dry sense of humor, became the sister I never had. Our little household expanded again when Elaine's book club friend Doris needed somewhere to stay during home renovations. The renovations stretched from weeks to months, and eventually we cleared out Frank's old home office to make a third bedroom. 3 women of a certain age, all missing family in different ways, creating something new together. We pooled our resources to make the mortgage payments more manageable. We took turns cooking, introduced each other to favorite books and movies, and sat on the porch swing in the evenings watching the neighborhood children play while Bailey dozed at our feet. It wasn't the family I'd envisioned for my later years, but it was warm and genuine. I retired from nursing at 65, my body finally rebelling against the physical demands of the job. My pension was modest, but with Social Security and Elaine and Doris contributing to household expenses, we managed comfortably enough. I began volunteering at the free community clinic 3 days a week, using my nursing skills to help those who couldn't afford medical care. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm. I still thought of Sophia daily, still felt the ache of her absence, especially on birthdays and holidays. I still sent cards, though less frequently now, knowing they'd likely go unread. But the raw wound of her rejection had scarred over. I'd built a life without her, not the one I would have chosen, but one with meaning and moments of joy nonetheless. Every night before sleep, I'd look at the single photo of Sophia I kept on my bedside table, taken at her high school graduation, her smile bright with hope for the future. "I love you," I'd whisper to that frozen image. "Whatever you think of me, however you feel, know that I have always loved you." I had no way of knowing that everything was about to change with the arrival of a certified letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in March 2022, nearly 17 years after Frank's passing. It was addressed to me in formal type, the return address from a law firm in Portland I didn't recognize. My first thought was that it must be some kind of mistake or perhaps a debt collector pursuing something from Frank's medical bills, though I'd settled those years ago. Elaine peered at me over her reading glasses as I stared at the envelope. "Aren't you going to open it? Just building up the courage?" I joked, weakly sliding my finger under the flap. The letter inside was brief and to the point. My Aunt Margaret, who had passed away in 2003, had indeed left her property to my cousin Russell's family when I declined to care for her. Russell had held on to the property but never developed it, using it occasionally as a hunting camp. He had recently passed away, and his children, having no attachment to the place, had sold it to a development company for a staggering sum. But here was the astonishing part: Aunt Margaret's will had contained a provision that if the property was ever sold, 10% of the proceeds would come to me. The development company had paid $42 million for the land, which had appreciated tremendously due to its waterfront location. 10% amounted to $4.2 million. I had to read the paragraph 3 times before the numbers made sense. The letter went on to explain that the money was being held in escrow pending my verification of identity and banking details. A cashier's check would be issued within 30 days of completing the enclosed paperwork. "Bessie," Elaine's voice seemed to come from far away. "Are you all right? You've gone white as a sheet." Wordlessly, I handed her the letter. Her eyes widened as she read, lips moving silently over the numbers. "Good Lord," she breathed finally. "Bessie, you're rich." "This can't be right," I said, voice shaking. "There must be some mistake." But there was no mistake. After a call to the law firm confirming the letter's authenticity, I sat at our kitchen table in stunned silence. The same table where I'd once calculated how to stretch $8,000 to cover Sophia's education. The irony wasn't lost on me. 22 years too late, the money had come. In the days that followed, I moved through a fog of disbelief. I completed the necessary paperwork, spoke with financial advisors recommended by the lawyer, and tried to wrap my mind around the reality of sudden wealth. $4.2 million. More money than I'd earned in my entire lifetime of nursing. More than I could spend in my remaining years. The ethical questions plagued me. Did I deserve this windfall? What was the right thing to do with it? If I'd accepted Aunt Margaret's original offer, instead of helping Sophia with college, would our relationship be intact today? Would Frank still be alive? The what-ifs were endless and pointless. Eventually, with guidance from financial professionals, I made some decisions. First, I set up a trust for my own security, ensuring I could age in place with good health care and without burdening anyone. Second, I established a small charitable foundation focused on nursing scholarships for disadvantaged students and addiction treatment programs in Frank's memory. For Elaine and Doris, who had shared their lives with me when I was alone, I set up generous annuities to ensure their comfort for life. Bailey got the promise of the best veterinary care money could buy, plus a ridiculous amount of premium dog treats. I didn't make extravagant purchases for myself. No mansion, no luxury car, no round-the-world cruise. I renovated our house to make it more accessible as we aged, installed a state-of-the-art security system, and bought a reliable new Toyota. My biggest splurge was a professional-grade sewing machine for the quilts I'd taken to making for the Children's Hospital. The local newspaper ran a small story about my inheritance and the nursing scholarship foundation I'd established. "Local retired nurses surprise windfall funds scholarships," read the headline. I agreed to the interview reluctantly, hoping it might inspire others to give back to the community. I didn't realize the story would be picked up by larger outlets or go viral online. That's when the messages started coming. Old acquaintances suddenly remembered our deep friendship. Distant relatives discovered our family connection. Former coworkers wanted to reconnect. Each message thinly veiled their true interest with reminiscences before working around to investment opportunities or worthy causes needing funding. I handled them politely but firmly, directing all requests to the Foundation's formal application process. The sudden attention was uncomfortable, making me grateful for our home security system and Bailey's impressive bark. But there was one message I never expected to receive, one that stopped my heart when it appeared in my email inbox one October morning. The subject line read simply, "Mom." The sender was Sophia Williams. I stared at the email notification on my phone, not daring to open it. Sophia. After 25 years of silence, she had reached out. My hands trembled so badly that Elaine noticed from across the living room. "Bessie. What is it, bad news?" "It's from Sophia," I whispered, still not touching the screen, as if the message might disappear if I moved. Elaine set down her knitting and moved to sit beside me on the couch. "Open it. Whatever it says, we'll handle it together." With a deep breath, I opened the email. "Mom," it began, no dear or other greeting. "I just happened to see an article about your inheritance. What an amazing turn of events. I'm truly happy for you. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about family and what matters in life. Lucy is 15 now and asking questions about her grandmother. I realize we've lost so much time and perhaps it's time to heal old wounds. James and I would like to invite you to Thanksgiving dinner at our home in Greenwich. It would be a chance to reconnect and for you to meet your granddaughter. Let me know if this would work for you. Sophia, no love or even regards at the end. Just her name, as impersonal as a business correspondence. And the timing right after news of my inheritance had spread couldn't be coincidental. "What does she say?" Elaine asked gently. I handed her the phone, watching her face as she read. Her expression shifted from hope to skepticism. "Well," she said carefully, "it's a start, isn't it?" "Is it?" I asked. "Or is it about the money?" "Does it matter?" Elaine countered. "Either way, you'd get to meet your granddaughter." That thought hit me with unexpected force. Lucy. 15 years old. My granddaughter, a teenager I'd never known. Whatever Sophia's motives, the chance to meet Lucy was genuine. I read the email again, noting its careful wording. I just happened to see an article. As if she hadn't been specifically looking for information about me. "I'm truly happy for you." A sentiment that cost nothing to express. It's time to heal old wounds. With no acknowledgement of who inflicted those wounds or any expression of regret. "She doesn't apologize," I noted. "No," Elaine agreed. "She doesn't." I spent days agonizing over how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore the email to make her feel the silence she'd subjected me to for decades. Another part wanted to pour out 25 years of hurt and longing. The rational part knew neither approach would lead to reconciliation. In the end, I kept it simple. "Sophia, thank you for your invitation. I would be happy to join you for Thanksgiving and meet Lucy. Let me know what time I should arrive and if I can bring anything." Mom. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were a turmoil of emotions. I swung between hope that this could be a genuine reconciliation and cynicism about Sophia's timing. Elaine helped me shop for a new outfit, something nice but not ostentatious. I wanted to look presentable but not like I was trying to flaunt wealth. What should I bring for Lucy? I fretted as we browsed a bookstore. I don't know what she likes. 15 is such an awkward age. Gift card, Elaine suggested practically. Let her choose something she wants. And maybe a small personal item, something meaningful but not overwhelming. I settled on a gift card to a popular online retailer and a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm in the shape of a bee for Bessie. Not too presumptuous, but more personal than cash. For Sophia and James, I chose a bottle of good but not extravagant wine. For the dinner itself, I offered to bring a pie using my mother's recipe that Sophia had loved as a child. Sophia replied that they had a caterer handling all the food but thanked me for the offer. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, I flew to New York and took a car service to a modest hotel in Greenwich, Connecticut. I'd chosen to stay at a hotel rather than imposing on Sophia's household, though she hadn't actually offered guest accommodations. Better to have my own space to retreat to if things went poorly. Thanksgiving morning dawned clear and cold. I dressed carefully in the charcoal gray slacks and burgundy cashmere sweater Elaine had helped me select, adding a simple pearl pendant that had been my mother's. I applied minimal makeup, arranged my silver hair neatly, and practiced smiling naturally in the mirror until I no longer looked terrified. The car service arrived promptly at 1 o'clock to take me to Sophia's address. As we drove through Greenwich, the homes grew progressively larger and more impressive, set back from the road behind manicured lawns and security gates. When we pulled up to the address Sophia had provided, I had to check it twice to be sure we hadn't made a mistake. It was a massive colonial-style mansion, white with black shutters, at least 6,000 square feet with a circular driveway and perfectly symmetrical landscaping. A luxury SUV and a sleek sports car were parked near the four-car garage. This wasn't just wealth. This was opulent wealth, the kind that required multiple millions of annual income to maintain. I hesitated on the doorstep, suddenly aware that my nice outfit probably cost less than the doorknob I was about to touch. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open to reveal a girl in jeans and a sweater, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, blue eyes widening as she took me in. Lucy, my granddaughter. Sophia's eyes in a face that somehow reminded me of my mother. "Hi," she said uncertainly. "Are you my grandmother?" I confirmed, voice thick with emotion. "You must be Lucy. It's so wonderful to finally meet you." She stood awkwardly for a moment before stepping back. Come in. Mom's in the kitchen with the caterers. Dad's watching football." I followed her into an enormous foyer with a sweeping staircase and chandelier that could have lit a small village. The house was decorated in what I recognized as expensive minimalist style, lots of white and gray, more like a magazine spread than a family home. "Your house is beautiful," I offered, not knowing what else to say. "Thanks. We just had it renovated last year." She fidgeted with her sleeve. "Mom said you're a nurse." "Retired now, but yes, for over 40 years. "That's cool. I'm thinking about medicine, maybe. For college." Before I could respond, Sophia appeared from a doorway that presumably led to the kitchen. At 47, she looked remarkably like I had at that age, though more polished, more expensive. Her hair was expertly colored and styled, her casual Thanksgiving outfit probably costing more than my monthly pension. "Mom," she said, coming forward to give me a brief impersonal hug. "You made it. How was the flight?" "Fine, thank you. You have a lovely home." "Thank you. We've worked hard for it." Something in her tone suggested a comparison to the modest house she'd grown up in. "Come meet James. Lucy, show your grandmother to the living room." Lucy led me through the foyer to a spacious living room dominated by an enormous television where a man in his 50s sat watching a football game. He rose when he saw me, revealing an athletic build maintained by regular workouts, I guessed. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "Mrs. Thompson, welcome. Sophia has told me a lot about you." I doubted that very much given the decades of silence, but I smiled politely. "It's good to meet you, James. Thank you for including me in your Thanksgiving." "Well, family should be together for holidays, shouldn't they?" he said smoothly, though his eyes evaluated me with a keenness that made me uncomfortable. We made awkward small talk until Sophia announced that dinner was ready. The dining room could have comfortably seated 20, but places were set for just the four of us at one end of a massive table. The caterers had prepared a traditional Thanksgiving spread with all the trimmings professionally presented on china, I suspected cost more than my car. As we took our seats, I noticed the strained atmosphere. Lucy seemed uncomfortable picking at her food and glancing occasionally between her parents and me. Sophia maintained a brittle smile while James dominated the conversation with stories about his law firm's recent successes. It wasn't until the dessert course that the conversation turned to me. "So, Bessie," James said, using my first name, though I hadn't invited him to, "Sophia mentioned you've had quite the financial windfall recently." And there it was, the real reason for the invitation. "Yes," I said simply. "My aunt left a provision in her will that I would receive a percentage if her property was ever sold." It was unexpected. 4.2 million, wasn't it? He asked casually, as if confirming the time of day. "James," Sophia murmured in token protest. "What? It's public knowledge from that newspaper article. Nothing wrong with discussing family finances at family dinner." He turned back to me. Have you made any investment plans? At your age, proper management is crucial. I set down my fork carefully. I've engaged financial advisors. They've helped me set up arrangements for my future care and some charitable work. Local advisors in Maine. He chuckled as if this were amusing. I'd be happy to introduce you to our team in New York. They handle significant wealth much more regularly. That's very kind, but I'm satisfied with my current arrangements. A look passed between Sophia and James, too quick to interpret, but clearly meaningful. Mom, Sophia said, her voice taking on a concerned tone that didn't reach her eyes. We've been worried about you living alone at your age, especially now with this money making you potentially vulnerable. I don't live alone, I corrected her. I share my home with 2 dear friends and my dog. We look after each other. Roommates, James said dismissively. Hardly adequate care for someone in their 70s with substantial assets. Lucy shifted uncomfortably in her chair, eyes downcast. We've been thinking, Sophia continued, that perhaps we could help you manage this transition. There's a wonderful assisted living community near here. Very upscale, excellent care. I don't need assisted living, I said mildly. I'm in good health and quite capable of managing my affairs. Of course you are now, James interjected. But it's about planning ahead, setting things up properly before any cognitive issues arise. My back stiffened. I assure you, my cognition is perfectly sound. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken by Lucy. Grandma Bessie, would you like to see the garden? Dad had it redesigned last spring. I smiled at her gratefully. I'd love that, Lucy. As we rose from the table, I noticed James touch Sophia's wrist in what appeared to be a signal. They clearly had a strategy, and I was beginning to see its outline all too clearly. The garden was beautiful, even in late November, professionally landscaped with stone pathways and dormant flower beds that would be spectacular in spring. Lucy walked beside me in awkward silence for a few minutes before speaking. They've been having money problems, she blurted suddenly. Dad's firm lost some big clients and they had to take out a second mortgage on the house. They've been fighting about it a lot. I looked at her in surprise. I'm sorry to hear that. She shrugged, kicking at a pebble on the path. It's whatever. They think I don't know, but the walls aren't that thick. She glanced back at the house. When Mom saw that article about you, she cried, not happy tears. I see, I said quietly. I didn't even know I had a grandmother until that article, Lucy continued. Mom always said you were dead. The words hit me like a physical blow. Dead. Sophia had told her child I was dead rather than explaining our estrangement. I'm sorry she didn't tell you the truth, I said when I could speak again. Why didn't you ever visit? Lucy asked the direct question of youth cutting through pretense. I said simply, your mother didn't want me in your lives. Lucy absorbed this with a thoughtful expression. That sounds like Mom, she finally said. She doesn't like being reminded of where she came from. All her friends here are old money people who went to Yale and stuff. We continued walking in silence until Lucy spoke again. They're going to ask you for money, she said bluntly. That's why they invited you. I suspected as much. Are you going to give it to them? I looked at this girl, so perceptive and caught in a household that valued appearances over authenticity. What do you think I should do? She considered the question seriously. I don't know. They're pretty bad with money. Dad buys expensive stuff to impress clients, and Mom redecorates every time one of her friends upgrades their house. She kicked another pebble. But they're still my parents, and they're really stressed lately. It's complicated, I acknowledged. Yeah, she agreed. Everything always is. When we returned to the house, Sophia and James had moved to what they called the family room, though it looked more like a furniture showroom than a place where family actually gathered. They sat close together on a pristine white sofa, united in purpose. Mom, please sit down, Sophia said, gesturing to an armchair across from them. We wanted to discuss something important with you. Lucy, James said pointedly, why don't you go do your homework now? It's Thanksgiving, Dad, she protested. Nevertheless, he insisted, and with a roll of her eyes, she left the room. I sat in the indicated chair, noting how it was positioned lower than their sofa, perhaps intentionally making me look up to them. A subtle power play I wouldn't have recognized in my younger years. So, I said pleasantly, what did you want to discuss? James cleared his throat. As Sophia mentioned, we've been concerned about your living situation, especially given your recent financial change. We've been talking, and we think we have a solution that benefits everyone. We'd like to help you manage your inheritance. Sophia added, set up trusts, make sure everything's handled properly. In exchange, James continued smoothly, we're hoping you might consider helping us with a temporary financial situation. Nothing serious, just a short-term liquidity issue with some investment properties we own. What James means, Sophia clarified, seeing my expression, is that we have an opportunity to consolidate some business loans that would save us considerably in the long run, but we need some capital to make it happen. I see, I said. And how much capital would you need? They exchanged glances before James answered. We're looking at around $500,000, as a family loan, of course. We'd draw up proper paperwork, reasonable interest, everything above board. $500,000. For people who'd treated me as dead until they learned I had money. For a daughter who hadn't spoken to me in 25 years. For a son-in-law who'd spent the afternoon subtly suggesting I was cognitively impaired. I looked at them sitting there so confident in their expensive clothes and their expensive house, certain that I, a simple nurse from Maine, would be dazzled by their lifestyle and eager to buy their attention. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the weeks since receiving Sophia's email doing research. I'd hired a private investigator, an expense I'd never have considered before the inheritance, to look into their financial situation. I knew about the second mortgage, the failed investment properties, the tax liens, and the pending bankruptcy filing. I knew they were drowning in debt maintained to keep up appearances. Before I respond, I said carefully, I'd like to clarify something. Sophia, did you tell Lucy I was dead? Sophia flushed. I might have implied that we lost touch because you passed away. It was easier than explaining everything. Easier than explaining that you cut me out of your life when I couldn't afford to keep you at Stanford. Easier than admitting you ignored my letters and calls for 25 years, even after your father died. That's ancient history, James interrupted impatiently. We're talking about moving forward as a family. As a family, I repeated. A family that only reached out when they learned I had money. That's not fair, Sophia protested weakly. No, it's not fair, Asin, I agreed, just like it wasn't fair to deny me the chance to know my granddaughter. Just like it wasn't fair to blame me for your student loans when I emptied my savings account and sold my mother's pearls to give you the college experience you wanted. Sophia's eyes widened slightly at the mention of the pearls. She'd never known about that sacrifice. Mom, I was young and stupid then. I didn't understand what you'd given up. And now, I asked quietly. She had the grace to look away. James, sensing the conversation slipping from his control, tried a different approach. Bessie, we're not just asking for money. We want to bring you into our lives, have you be part of the family again. Lucy needs her grandmother. Lucy needed her grandmother 15 years ago, I said. She needed her grandmother when she took her first steps, said her first words, started school. Where was your concern for family then? The silence that followed was deafening. I should tell you, I continued calmly, that most of my inheritance is already in an irrevocable trust. I don't have access to $500,000 in liquid assets, even if I wanted to give it to you. This was technically true, though I could have accessed some funds if I'd truly wanted to help them. But the trust setup had been a deliberate choice, knowing this moment might come. What do you mean, a trust? James demanded. What kind of trust? A carefully structured one that provides for my future care and funds the nursing scholarship foundation I've established. The foundation that bears Frank's name, by the way. Your father, Sophia, who you didn't bother to visit when he was dying. Sophia at least had the decency to look ashamed. James, however, was growing visibly angry. This is ridiculous. You're sitting on millions, and you won't help your own daughter when she needs it. What kind of mother are you? The kind who was dead until there was money involved, I replied evenly. You self-righteous old woman, he spat. You have no idea the pressure we're under, the social obligations, the expectations. This house, our lifestyle, Lucy's future, it all costs money. Money you don't have, I finished for him. Because you've been living beyond your means to keep up appearances. How dare you judge us? Sophia interjected, finding her voice at last. You have no idea what our lives are like. You sit in your little house in Maine passing judgment when you've never had to navigate the world we live in. You're right, I acknowledged. I've never had to pretend to be something I'm not to impress people who only care about status. I've never had to lie to my child about her family to maintain a facade. I stood up, feeling suddenly tired of the whole charade. I didn't come here for this. I came hoping foolishly, perhaps, that there might be a real desire to reconnect. I can see now that was naive. So that's it, Sophia demanded. You're just going to walk away? No help, no understanding, nothing. I'm offering something more valuable than money, I said. I'm offering a relationship, a real one based on truth and mutual respect. If you ever want that, you know how to reach me. James laughed bitterly. A relationship doesn't pay our mortgage or Lucy's tuition. No, I agreed, but it might give Lucy something she clearly needs more than another renovation or luxury car, a sense that there's more to life than appearances and status. I moved toward the door, pausing to look back at my daughter. The little girl who once sat surrounded by picture books on our worn living room carpet seemed utterly gone, replaced by this brittle, status-conscious woman I barely recognized. I loved you enough to let you go to Stanford, even when we couldn't afford it, I said quietly. I loved you enough to keep trying to reach you for 25 years, despite your silence. I loved you enough to come here today, hoping for reconciliation. That love is still available to you, Sophia, no strings attached. But I won't buy my way into your life, and I won't enable the facade you're trying so desperately to maintain. James stormed out of the room, muttering about wasting time. Sophia remained seated, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. Goodbye, Sophia, I said. Please tell Lucy it was a pleasure to meet her. As I headed toward the front door, I heard rapid footsteps on the stairs. Lucy appeared in the foyer, slightly breathless. Are you leaving? She asked, dismay evident in her voice. I'm afraid so, I replied. This visit hasn't gone quite as I hoped. She nodded, unsurprised. They asked for money, right? They did. And you said no. I did. She bit her lip, considering this. Are you mad at me too? Oh, Lucy. I said, heart aching for this perceptive child caught in her parents' materialism. Not at all. None of this is your fault. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to her. This has my phone number, email, and address. If you ever want to talk or visit, I'm there. No strings, no expectations. Just a grandmother who would love to know her granddaughter. She took the envelope, tucking it quickly into her pocket. They might not let me call you. Then keep it for when you're older. The offer doesn't expire. She nodded, then impulsively stepped forward to give me a quick hug. Happy Thanksgiving, Grandma Bessie. Happy Thanksgiving, Lucy, I replied, throat tight with emotion. I left the mansion without another word from Sophia, the heavy door closing behind me with a decisive thud. The drive back to my hotel passed in a blur, my mind replaying the afternoon's events. I'd gone hoping for reconciliation and found only calculation. The daughter I'd loved and sacrificed for had seen me as nothing more than a potential solution to her financial problems. It hurt, but strangely it hurt less than the decades of silence had. At least now I knew exactly where I stood. Back in my hotel room, I called Elaine. How did it go? She asked immediately. About as well as you predicted, I admitted. They wanted a loan. $500,000. Good Lord, she breathed. Did they at least try to hide their intentions? They waited until after dessert, I said with a hollow laugh. I told her everything from the mansion's opulence to James's thinly veiled insults to Sophia's revelation that she'd told Lucy I was dead. Saying it all aloud made the absurdity of the situation clear, and by the end of the story, we were both laughing through tears. Oh, Bessie, Elaine said finally. I'm so sorry. What a horrible Thanksgiving. Not entirely, I corrected her. I met Lucy. She's wonderful, Elaine. Smart and perceptive, nothing like her parents. She was the one bright spot in the whole affair. Will you be able to maintain contact with her? I don't know. I gave her my information, but Sophia and James may intercept any attempts at communication. I'll have to wait and see. That night, I slept surprisingly well, as though a weight had been lifted. I'd spent years imagining reunions with Sophia, constructing elaborate scenarios where she acknowledged her mistakes and we tearfully reconciled. The reality had been painful but clarifying. I couldn't change Sophia's choices or values. I could only be true to my own. I flew home the next day, returning to the small blue house I now shared with Elaine, Doris, and Bailey. The Christmas decorations they'd put up in my absence, the smell of Doris's famous apple cider simmering on the stove, the enthusiastic greeting from my one-eyed dog all felt more like home than Sophia's sterile mansion ever could. Life resumed its comfortable patterns. I continued volunteering at the clinic, quilting for the Children's Hospital, and enjoying quiet evenings with my housemates. The only change was that I stopped sending cards to Sophia. After 25 years of reaching out into silence, I finally accepted that she didn't want a mother, she wanted a bank. 6 months passed without word from Connecticut. Then one rainy afternoon in May, a car pulled into our driveway. Bailey's warning bark brought me to the window in time to see Lucy stepping out of a taxi, a small backpack slung over her shoulder. I rushed to the door, hardly daring to believe my eyes. Lucy, what are you doing here? Does your mother know where you are? She nodded, looking both nervous and determined. She does. I told them I was coming to see you for the weekend. Dad said no, but Mom? Mom actually said I should go. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a brief note in Sophia's handwriting. Mom Lucy has been insistent about getting to know you. I won't stand in her way. She has a return ticket for Sunday. Please make sure she's on that flight. Sophia, no apology, no acknowledgement of Thanksgiving's disaster, but also no prohibition. It was something. Lucy spent that weekend asking endless questions about her father's family, about my nursing career, about what her mother had been like as a child. She helped Elaine in the garden, learned to make Doris's apple cider, and took long walks with Bailey. On Sunday morning, she sat beside me on the porch swing, where I often had my morning coffee. I want to come back, she said simply. Maybe for part of the summer? I'd like that very much, I told her. If your parents approve. Mom will, she said with surprising confidence. Things have been different since Thanksgiving. They sold the big house. We're in an apartment now while they sort out the bankruptcy stuff. I tried to hide my surprise. That must be a difficult adjustment. She shrugged. It's actually better. They fight less. Dad's working at a smaller firm and Mom's got a job at the community college teaching communications. She's happier than when she was just attending charity luncheons and trying to impress people who didn't really care about her. And how are you doing with all these changes? It's weird, she admitted. Some of my friends don't come around anymore, which makes me think they weren't really friends. But I'm okay. I joined this photography club at school that I really like. I smiled, thinking how resilient young people could be. I'd love to see your photos sometime. I brought some, she said eagerly, pulling out her phone. That's why I wanted to come this weekend. I'm doing this project on real life for my photography class, and I thought maybe this was more real than what I had before. As promised, Lucy returned for 3 weeks that summer. Sophia didn't visit, but she called once to check on Lucy and spoke to me briefly civilly. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was communication, the first voluntary contact in 25 years. Over the next year, Lucy became a regular visitor during school breaks. Elaine taught her to garden. Doris introduced her to classic literature, and I shared nursing stories and family history. She took hundreds of photographs documenting our simple life, winning a school award for her Reality versus Appearance photography series. For her 16th birthday, with Sophia's reluctant permission, I established a modest educational trust for Lucy, enough to ensure she could attend any college without debt, but not so much that it would distort her values or work ethic. The gift came with a letter explaining how her mother's college experience had contributed to our estrangement, and my hope that she would choose education that brought her fulfillment rather than status. Sophia and I maintained a careful distance, exchanging occasional emails about Lucy's visits, but nothing more. The wall between us had been built over too many years to come down easily, if ever. Sometimes healing means accepting that some relationships can't be fully restored, that the best outcome isn't the one you imagined, but the one that's actually possible. 2 years after that disastrous Thanksgiving, I received an unexpected email from Sophia. It contained just a photograph and a brief message. The photo showed her standing in front of a small office with a sign reading, First Generation College Success Center. Her message said simply, "My new job, helping students like I once was. Thought you might want to know." I sat staring at the screen, tears blurring my vision. It wasn't an apology or a request for reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement, perhaps, that the values I'd tried to instill had taken root somewhere beneath the years of materialism and status seeking. It was a small green shoot pushing through concrete, not a flourishing relationship, but a sign of life nonetheless. What I've learned through all of this is that true wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts or inheritance. True wealth is in the connections we build, the love we share, the authenticity we bring to our relationships. Money can't buy reconciliation, and pretense can't sustain happiness. All it can do is distort and corrupt what might otherwise be genuine. I'm 74 now. Lucy is headed to college next year, studying social work at a state university she chose specifically for its program, not its prestige. She visits regularly and calls me weekly. Elaine, Doris, and I still share the blue house now, with a ramp instead of porch steps as concession to our aging knees. Bailey crossed the Rainbow Bridge last year, but a new rescue dog named Charlie has taken his place as our devoted companion. The Nursing Scholarship Foundation helps 15 disadvantaged students annually with preference, given to those who've been affected by family addiction. Each year, I attend the scholarship reception and tell the recipients about Frank, about his struggles and the disease that took him too soon. I want them to know that the money comes from real people with real stories, not just faceless donors. Sophia and I may never fully bridge the gap between us. Some wounds cut too deep, some choices echo too long. But I've found peace with that, and I hope she has too. I still love her, still keep her high school graduation photo on my bedside table, still whisper goodnight to that smiling girl I once knew. Love doesn't require reciprocation to be real. It just is steadfast and enduring, even when unacknowledged. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between your values and someone you love? Have you experienced the pain of family estrangement or the complexities of reconciliation? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in authentic connections. Thank you for listening, and may your own family journeys bring you wisdom and peace.